Hey everybody, William Wallace here, William Wallace for America. Thank you for turning into another episode here of our Constitutional Amendment series. And today I'm with State Senator Katrina Jackson of District 34, and I'm going to let her later talk about the area where that is. But as you know, we've got 7 constitutional amendments coming up on this ballot, and as I've been joking about in the other videos, you're going to get worn out trying to read and find out. So the idea of these videos is to simply explain them. And with me today, as I said, Senator Jackson, who's going to talk about the amendment number 1. So it's one that I think is the most important because it's number 1, right?
Yes. Nice to meet you.
Senator, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the amendment number 1 with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us about this. When people go into the voting booth, I'm going to read for what's going to say when you actually go into the booth and you see the description. It's going to say, "Do you support an amendment declaring that to protect human life, a right to abortion and the funding of abortion shall not be found in the Louisiana Constitution?" Senator Jackson, will you explain that to us, please?
Sure.
What that means?
Well, of course, let me give you a little background. In about 2 or 3 other states, I think it's 3, the courts have found where the Constitution was silent in those states, not only a right to an abortion, but a government-funded abortion. So my initial shock was that Medicare dollars, Medicaid dollars, and other dollars that taxpayers pay for health care could actually go to fund individuals' abortions.
Because it's in the Constitution.
Well, not because it's in the Constitution, but because in 2 or 3 other states, the judges interpreted the lack of having something in the Constitution that deals with this issue. They found that the state actually guaranteed a right to government-funded abortions. And so what we're doing is placing in our Constitution that we do not. And so this is one of those amendments where, of course, Louisiana can't determine whether or not abortion is legal or not, but whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, I think a lot of us share the views that abortions should not be funded by taxpayer dollars. So this amendment will ensure that that doesn't happen in the state of Louisiana. For those who are pro-life, of course, it's a strong pro-life stance amendment. And that's really what it does. It says that we don't recognize a right to abortion nor a government-funded abortion, which means that we ensure if this amendment passes that no court in this state or in any federal court can interpret our Constitution as recognizing a right to pay for abortions in this state with government funding.
Now, for our pro-choice listeners, this does not end abortion, nor does it make it illegal in Louisiana. This simply just talks about the funding and whether basically a judge can rule legislate from the bench.
The only entity that can make abortion unconstitutional is the United States Supreme Court. So no, it does not do that.
Okay.
Louisiana's Constitution does not have the power to do that. Of course, we're always what we call primed by the federal law. The federal law makes abortion constitutional, and so the real crust of this law for me is that making sure that a judge doesn't interpret us as recognizing abortion and therefore taking our health care state funding, taxpayer dollars that, right now in this time of need is critically going to serve those, to treat those with COVID and other pre-existing conditions, that we ensure that money stays in the area of health care where it's needed and not begin to fund individual abortions.
And the reason why I bring on these pro-choice and pro-life issues between 2 people that are voting is because I want to give reason for our pro-choice people to get behind this bill and why it's good. Why, is there any other reasons why it's good for the state that pro-choice people might want to get behind it?
Well, number one, our medical dollars, for healthcare dollars, will stay in healthcare, and number 2, it's just for me the right thing to do.
The way I understand this too is that if we do not vote for this amendment and we don't get it, that a judge would be able to rule on something with abortion from the bench, basically?
Right. A judge on the bench will be able to rule in this state whether abortion is constitutional or not. Of course, that could be challenged, but the judge can also rule that Louisiana's Constitution recognizes a right to government-funded abortion. So a judge could actually rule, like they have in other states, that the state has to pay for individual abortions.
So for people who on both sides of the fence can know that this amendment can prevent legislation from the bench and force it to go to the legislature in the future, so that way the people who've elected the legislators get to have a voice in future decisions on it.
Right, and I think that's what's so important, that Louisiana citizens have never really had to vote on the issue. I had an opportunity to vote on this issue, and this is the first time that the citizens of Louisiana are getting to vote on this issue, where judges and legislators have been able to vote on it. And that's why it was so important to bring it to the people.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Now, where before, this is an issue that only legislators and judges got to vote on, but now the people have the opportunity to vote on this issue. Now, I do want to point out that you're an attorney.
Yes.
So I want to say that, because to our listeners, so you're not just saying this from an elected position, you're saying this from a legal position also.
Right.
So you have a lot of knowledge on this matter.
Right. I believe that it's extremely important that anytime you can put the right in the people's hand to vote on something, that you should. I've seen in various court judges rule on this issue and rule on the different issues regarding abortion and other health care and funding for the state, and you've seen it go either way. You've just seen judges make a decision on what the election process should look like in Louisiana as far as the early voting, and you just rarely get to see where the people make the choice. They make the choice of voting for us, of who served them, but until it comes to a constitutional amendment, the people don't really get to make a choice. And so I just, even as an attorney though, we argue the case passionately. But if it's a jury trial, then you have 12 people and they speak for the entire state. If it's a bench trial, then only the judge makes a decision. So this is the first time that the people get to make this decision. To
keep it out of the hands of or put it back in the hands of the people.
Right.
That's a great way to put this. So let's also, when you go into the voting booth, when you look at it, am I voting for it? If I vote for it, am I voting against it? If I vote against it, or am I voting against it if I really vote for it? I want to clear this up. So a vote for this bill would mean what?
A vote for this bill, of course, doesn't mean that we rule abortion unconstitutional. The state of Louisiana nor its citizens have the right to do that, because abortion,
they would still have that right,
yeah.
Whether they vote for this or against it, they still have that right.
Right. But a vote for this bill ensures that Louisiana's Constitution doesn't recognize a right to abortion. More importantly, it also ensures that no judge will ever be able to say that the state of Louisiana has to pay for an individual's abortion out of the tax dollars that go to health care.
So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, a vote for this amendment is ensuring that the people get to have a say on right to life issues.
Right, and have a say on where
abortion issues.
Abortion issues, and have a say on where our medical dollars go. Those government-funded, medical programs. It's really important in times of shortage that our hospitals, who are operating throughout the state, receive the healthcare dollars they need. That under Medicaid, our constituents who have healthcare issues and they are not, they're considered indigent in the sense of cannot afford their own health care, that those dollars are there. So that's another big piece of it that I don't want the people to miss, is that. So even if you're pro-choice, you may feel like you should have the choice on whether or not to have an abortion, or a person should have that, but you don't want your tax dollars going to pay for someone's abortion, and you would vote for that amendment under how you feel, if that's the way you feel.
So one last time, a vote for this, whether you're pro-life or whether you're pro-choice, a vote for this puts the abortion decision back in the hands of the people. And takes it out of the hands of an elected official or a judge who might legislate from the bench.
Yes, that's correct.
I like that. So I want to give people a tidbit of information that this is your first year as a state senator.
Yes, it is.
And you wrote this bill how many years ago, you said?
A year ago, in 2019, spring of 2019. I was in the Louisiana State House, and I wrote this piece of legislation, but the way it was written, because I really wanted to give the people the voice, is that during the highest voter turnout we have is during a presidential election. So when we looked at the elections, we say, when are more people going to vote than, basically we pinpointed the election where most people were voting as the presidential election. Okay. So we didn't put it on the ballot last year. We waited until the presidential election, so it was written into the bill that it would go on the ballot this year. So
you're getting to see it go through as a state senator when you wrote it as a state representative.
Yes.
So what I'd like to point out about this is this goes to show how much care you have for giving not only for life,
Yeah.
but and not only for choice, so to speak, for people to have the right to choose, not so much for abortion, but as for people to be able to have the right in the elective process
To voice,
to voice their
voices
opinion,
be heard.
let their voices be heard,
Right.
and that's I want to be clear on that. This is about how much you care about people having the right to have their voices heard.
Right.
That you wrote this and you're willing to be patient at a time when the most people would be able to have their voices heard.
Right.
It shows how much concern you have for people to have their voices heard.
Yeah, that's always been very important to me. When you look at the turnout of elections and local elections, even if they're held all around the state, there's an extremely low turnout. I would say even for the presidential election, I'm not satisfied with the turnouts we have in the past, but those tend to be trending the highest voter turnouts. And so I really just wanted the people to have an opportunity to have their voices heard, and the most people possible. And so there was a lot of debate. This bill was amended actually because it had last year's election, but it was such a low voter turnout in local elections in the past that I actually switched it to this year's election. And that's very important because you just want people to vote. And if I was swaying this thing heavily toward, pro-lifers in the sense of how they would have voted, pro-lifers tend to vote more in gubernatorial elections.
Uh-huh.
And so our turnout is still high then.
Right.
And so, but we wanted the people's voice to be heard. I am fighting for life at every stage of life.
Amen to that.
Right. Yeah. But wanting people's voices to be heard, and wanting them to understand this amendment and what it meant.
So you're giving more people the opportunity to vote on it. That's why you did this way. Mm-hmm. You're giving more people have their voices heard. And I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank
you. And so pro-life amendment number 1, would love for everybody to support it. I think it's good for everybody. It's good for our state. It's good for our state because it puts power back in the hands of people instead of legislating from the bench. And Senator Jackson, thank you very much.
So much.
I really appreciate your time on this. Everybody, keep your eyes open and on the election day and share with your friends who will know more about this. Thank you so much.